This is Conspirinormal.
All right, guys, welcome back to Conspirinormal, and we are here, myself and this guy here, right here, Serfiel, and we're going to just talk about a grab bag of topics. We got one of our favorite friends of the show, Mr. David Metcalfe, is back joining us. Dave, welcome back to Conspirinormal, man.
Always good to chat with you all.
Yeah, you've been helping us out a lot recently. You did not too long ago a presentation, about a couple of months ago now. You did a presentation for our Patreons, which you guys can get onto the Patreon and watch that. I believe that's at the $10 level. So,
origin of the Starseed narrative.
Yeah, which I think is what you're going to talk about when we have Strange Realities here in October.
Yeah. After I did the presentation, a lot of great feedback from everybody that was in that Zoom meetup, and then additional stuff, just kind of looking into it more. There's a lot more to say, and I think I can streamline it down. One of the things I completely skipped over was the kind of like Black cultural elements to the Starseed movement. You know, like obviously Funkadelic, right? Like Mothership and like the Nation of Islam stuff. So I'm going to have to work that in. And
would Sun Ra also be included in that?
Yeah, Sun Ra would definitely be included in that. You know, it's amazing when you hear folks that are in the orchestra talk about their experience with Sun Ra. And when they talk about him, you know, he's from Saturn. Like, there's no question about it. There's no hemming and hawing about that. His music was from space, and it was a gift to humanity to raise it to the next level. So I'm definitely going to work Sun Ra into it. Nation of Islam elements, talk about Funkadelic and that, and then also kind of streamline what I presented last and deal with some of the changes in it. Since I did the presentation, I've been on Alan Steinfeld's weekly Making Contact video cast, and had an opportunity to talk to a lot of people that are sort of within the Starseed culture. So
yeah, we also on the Patreon, you guys can find that there too. This is just going to be a big advertisement for our Patreon, apparently. We also, with Chris Corey, we did the Richard Boylan's quiz on whether you were a Starseed or not, or a Star Child.
Yes, and I scored very highly.
Yes, right. Yes, I think Chris did as well. I administered the test. It was really to find out if they were replicants or not, and I still haven't told them whether or not they are. But
you see a tortoise laying on the ground.
Yeah. They're definitely Starseed. So that particular test is a lot more intense than the Steiger test. The questions are much more dramatic. You know, like, have you levitated something as a child? I mean, that was like, wow.
Well, I think my favorite one was: have you healed a person? Have you brought them back to life? Have you healed an entire ecological area?
Yeah.
In other words, have you restored a forest back to its former glory?
Right.
Then you might be a Star Child.
Yeah.
That whole thing only equaled like 5 points.
Right. Right. Yeah, there was I think one of the levitation ones or something was like 25 points or so. There was a weird disconnect in the pointing system, the point system on that.
Well,
yes.
Your presentation will fit very well into Strange Realities 2021 since it is a hybrid event.
Ooh.
Good one. Wow. I like that. So let's kind of get into I guess like the main core, what we're going to kind of talk about. We're going to talk about, just like I said, a grab bag of topics, but I thought we'd kind of hit this UFO report and what your thoughts were about that. And then I've got kind of a kind of going along with that, something I read in your blog today about the blog titled Hypnotic Media and Deja Vu UFO, Brief Analysis of Public Interest in Flying Saucers from 2004 to 2021.
Yeah.
So these two things kind of go together. I mean, I think you wrote this back in May, but now this report is out, and of course, UFOs are back in the media, and here we go again. Like we've kind of talked about this with Tim Banal and Aaron Goulias, and just not too much of beating a dead horse. But what's your thoughts on this? Did anything stand out to you? Is there anything that's particularly interests you, or is there we're just more of the same?
Yeah, I mean, so I wrote that blog post, and then realized, as the report was coming out, I was like, oh man, I'm going to have to write like a rebuttal to myself, because I thought that with the amount of media it was seeing, the whole point of that blog post was that if you go to Google Trends and you put UFO as your term and you look at the public interest since 2004 till now on the topic of UFOs, we're not at the highest point that it's been at. Mm-hmm. And at the time that I wrote it, it was even less so. So back in May, it was even less so, despite the fact that there's the New York Times piece in 2017, despite all of the kind of markers along the way, which I think people, closer to the paranormal culture and interested in UFOs, like, have just been bludgeoned with. But in terms of the general population, the Google trend map for it, which obviously has its flaws as a data analytics thing, but it does give a general sense. But the actual interest is not at the highest point. The highest point was in 2007. There was a couple kind of like semi-UFO waves that were happening, including the Stephenville, Texas event. And the interesting thing that I saw was, what kind of surprised me as I was thinking about it, was that the difference between now and 2007, that particular one, there were other spikes as well related to different media events where UFOs had come up. But the difference between Stephenville was the highest. And it had Angelia Joyner, who was a local reporter writing from Stephenville about the UFO wave that was occurring. And it went from her local reporting to the national media, and it was very organic. Yeah. In the way that it came out in the media. Now the difference is that in 2017 we have this New York Times piece, but the New York Times piece is so artificial.
Yeah, totally top down.
Yeah, it's top down from the media environment, and there's no wave, right? Like there may be, the military may be seeing these incursions of whatever they are, in their training spaces and stuff, but regular people are not encountering a UFO wave. And if you look at the past, when UFOs become incredibly popular, it's because regular people, police officers, delivery drivers, grandma and grandpa are like walking out their door and seeing waves of UFOs, and there's the 1973, that amazing, pamphlet that was put out by Hynek's organization, CUFOS, which is called 1973 Year of the Humanoid.
Right.
There was like a humanoid invasion in terms of the encounters that people were having.
Different types of humanoids too.
Yeah, multiple different types of humanoids, different settings. There were actually humanoid encounters by UGA that were written up. That one it was written close to Halloween, and the witness has a kind of, I think their name is Mars Walker. So that one's a little bit questionable, but it was in the media, and it was very prevalent, this idea that this wave was happening, and we haven't seen that. What we had in 2017 was, like you guys said, a top-down piece from Leslie Kean, who's been writing about UFOs forever. You know, she was with Bud Hopkins when he passed away. You know, it's a very artificial kind of media push. And it's interesting to see that if you go to Google Trends, that plays out in the interest that we're seeing in this stuff. So no matter how many media people, I thought surely come the day of the release, right, we're going to see a spike. No, I mean, the numbers are raising more than they were, but it's still not a spike like Stephenville was. It's not even a spike like there was I don't know the exact date, but maybe in 2010, there was a UFO over a Chinese airport that shut down the airport. And even that spike is higher than what we're seeing right now. And that's, you know, I mean, that's a case in China, right?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see that, you know, the public interest just, it's not catching the public, right? Like no matter how much media is being pushed on this, no matter how many Tucker Carlson and all the rest of it, the narrative just kind of rings hollow. And, you know, one of the things I'm really interested in with this report is that it comes right on the back of a major R&D push for funding in the National Sciences Foundation. And everything that they outline in the press release that came after the report was a multidisciplinary R&D program, you know, to analyze whatever these things that they're seeing are, you know, and things that are getting picked up. And then, you know, to do this multidisciplinary analysis, and there's an R&D component mentioned, right? So research and development. And, you know, I can't put my finger on why you would use that as an advertisement for, you know, a new push in science or whatever. You know, it's been the case in the past. There's a great, in Ray Palmer's Flying Saucer magazine, there's a great feature piece that was, do UFOs spur youth science, right? So, you know, the UFO played a large part in kind of popularizing the space program and the idea of the space program, which seems weird, you know, but it did get people thinking about space and kind of in that headspace, you know. But what the benefit to the current sort of situation is, it all just seems very strange.
It just seemed like it created just a side note for most people who weren't already interested in it. Like, I don't know anyone who wasn't interested in the phenomenon who then like became interested. They would just use those big press moments as an opportunity to like try to talk to me and be like, oh, well, hey, you're into UFOs. What do you think about this? You know?
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, my coworkers and stuff, they don't, no one's very excited. You know, and it's really interesting to see this amount of focus put on it in the media and no one to be very excited, you know.
But I think it does serve as that, you know, that like saucers did for the space program, like you mentioned, interest in this and even studying it and having like multidisciplinary people looking at it, scientists looking at this. It's a, you know, for brainstorming, it may be a very fruitful way of coming up with new possibilities for technologies if that's really the goal.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the interesting things is that, you know, if a program does seriously roll out from this, it has an opportunity to have that effect. You know, I mean, that's kind of what the UFO does.
And like early technologies, like around radio or even electricity and things like that, you know, people propose that a lot of people who developed those technologies were inspired by like occult ideas pretty much.
Yeah, well, in contact too. I mean, there's a lot of instances. You know, Xerox was invented by a guy who said that brownies, little elves, showed up and kind of gave him the idea for the Xerox machine.
Yeah.
You know, there's a whole history of sort of leading thinkers having visionary experiences with this stuff. You know, and I think that as a visionary symbol for it to be pushed out into culture, it'll be real interesting to see how that, affects things. Or even if it does cause a wave, with all these people focusing their mind on this, if that will actually intensify some sort of contact experience. It's really emboldened folks like Mark Sims, who is doing a different form of the Greer CE5 contact modality. And, it's kind of really empowered that community to further their message, to get more organized, sort of push for these group meditations to bring in phenomena, which if that gets spurred and that starts to happen, then you would see more of a public interest because more people are going to be exposed to the actual phenomena, So it may be sort of a tiered process where, although the majority of the public really isn't as engaged with the media blast on the UFO thing, it may be that the communities that are become empowered by that in some way, But it's weird because the report only goes back to 2004. It doesn't really deal with anything that are like the classic UFO experiences. Even people like Matthew Roberts, who was a cryptographer on one of the ships that the videos have come from. He had a really intense kind of contact experience after the fact, after having just seen the radar returns. And but his experience was driven by reading William Walker Atkinson and the Kabbalion, and so obviously he's not going to be featured in this very like kind of tech heavy focus that comes out of the report, or even Kevin Day. Kevin Day reported some kind of intense, more sort of phenomenological experiences around this stuff, and that's gotten sidelined. It's become very much a military versus a technology sort of narrative.
Yeah, taking that kind of like mystical kind of material out of the narrative.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if it would serve the goals for the people who are pushing it, So, but obviously that's a major part of it. I mean, that's even in Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis have a model of the UFO phenomena, which kind of highlights the high weirdness aspect as one of the key aspects of the phenomena. So to take that out, it's kind of strange. It's like, what are we now looking at,
Right. What I'm real curious about, because I know just for myself that I haven't really cared too much about this. And I think that a lot of that is because, I'm more still worried about what's going on in the wider world with the pandemic and all these other things that are happening. So it's kind of just, to me, it's just more background noise. And I think a lot of people probably feel the same way that I do about this. It's just like, oh, it's just one more thing and just whatever. And that is a possibility of the why it just isn't, the interest just isn't as sparking as much as it should be, or it has before.
Well, and I think that that's the difference, if we actually had a wave, right, and actually had people seeing the phenomenon happening,
Right.
Well, we're also old, though. I mean, what is this going to do for the young generation? I mean,
yeah.
This could really help shape, if like this is normalized.
The kind of disturbing thing about it, though, is that in 5 years, 70 years of history has been erased.
True.
Because nobody's looking at like the old case studies.
Right.
That stuff's all been completely sidelined and erased, and no one's talking about it. Like you don't have Lou Elizondo going out being like, you should get yourself, flying saucer review and, read the old case encounters. Like none of that's being talked about. And so the UFO that people are being exposed to in the media, it's not the UFO that we've known for, 70 years. And that's obviously gone through its different stages. You have the contactee movement, which when, you know, Stanton Friedman and that came along, that was sidelined, right? Like nobody wanted to talk about the contactees. You know, so there's the whole like sort of like Keelian UFO period, which is, you know, so I mean, so there's this kind of erasure of different aspects of the phenomena has occurred.
Well, I haven't been able to finish that Hansen lecture about UFOs, but you know, obviously, I mean, does he say anything about that? Like about how the trickster obscures itself? Like, is that maybe what's going on?
Yeah, he goes into the paranormal aspects and the UFO. That particular talk is very much a bibliography.
Okay.
So he kind of avoids any theorizing throughout it.
But it would make sense, like, with that lens that, you know, oh, now is the time where, you know, everything's going to be revealed, and what's actually going on is everything is being even further, pushed back even further, and all the different, more interesting aspects of this are being obscured even more.
Yeah, you know, and I think that it's weird, though, because I think that we're it's a wonderful opportunity to start to actually, like, look at those kind of theories, right? Because what exactly are we dealing with right now? You know, because and that was kind of where the idea of deja vu UFO, you know, like, what is it that we're seeing? You know, because it's top down, it's radar returns and gun sights. You know, it's not the UFO that we used to know, but then the UFO that we used to know is also a mediated object. So what is that? What's the honest thing? You know, like, what are we talking about? Like, what is that actual, you know, what's at the heart of all of this mediation? You know what I mean? And so is the obscuring happening because of the phenomena, or is the obscuring happening because of the way the media works?
It's the Black Lodge.
Yeah, yeah, right. Or, you know, some sort of nefarious manipulation of the infosphere, you know?
Well, I think the media just kind of moves, I don't know, they seem to just move on really quickly from something like this. They're just not as, I don't know, they just don't seem as interested, like, okay, here it is, you know, and it doesn't seem to sell as well as other stories.
Well, and that was what was interesting to me about the 2007 situation with Angelia Joyner, right? Because she was actually invested in doing investigative reporting and, you know, going and talking to people and being, you know, embedded in the situation. Whereas if you look at the media since 2017, how many stories have that Tic Tac image?
Right.
I mean, it's like that's all we see is that Tic Tac image. And they don't even use stock photos or hire an illustrator or, you know, something else, right? Or if they do, they like put up an Adamski saucer, or, you know, it's something that, you know, has its own sort of problematic history. And so, you know, and the same thing with the writing is no one's actually, you know, I mean, most of these news stories they're not written. They're just rehashed talking points. It's like the same thing again and again. It's an edited version of the New York Times piece, or you'll have an editorial where, you know, the person will be saying another sort of canned take on it. You know, I mean, one of the things that's been popping up recently after the report, and I think it even started when some of the contents of the report was leaked before it came out, is the idea that, you know, like the U-2 spy plane and stuff were responsible for all of these UFO sightings, right? That like they were able to name these different covert projects that, you know, could be tied to people seeing UFOs. And Kurt Collins has done an analysis of that and shown that that's not true at all. Like that was shop talk. Like that was the selling point for selling the projects, that they would be like, oh, we're so good that people think we're a UFO. Like that was like, you know, engineers talking amongst each other and patting each other on the back, and it became a media point, but it doesn't bear out to reality. When you look at the actual contact cases and encounters and witness statements, they weren't seeing these things. They weren't describing that, so we're getting that narrative again where they're talking about, like, oh, well, these unknowns that are in the report, there were unknowns in the past, and it was just, projects that were in the black and people were mistaking them. But the thing is that's not a fact. Like that's a cultural myth, or a cultural, that's a legend, whatever the proper term for that would be, but it's not true, but then you'll see this in the op-eds and that, where people will repeat this thing and act like, oh, well, we just explained it. Like, no, you just cut and pasted from, this trope. It's a cliche. It's not actual looking at the situation, and so much of the media now, I mean, the weird thing, and you see it with some of the people that are getting featured on CNN and that, the media cycle today goes like Twitter to a blog post to immediately getting sucked up into the news. And it's really easy, if you know what you're doing in terms of positioning things, to suddenly become an expert when, you ran a Twitter feed, right? Like, and that's not actual necessarily analysis, that's just you tweeted a lot, or advice, like Vice will hire anybody. You know what I mean? Like, if you get an article in Vice, that doesn't mean that you're an investigative journalist. Like, that doesn't mean you're a journalist. It means that you blogged enough and Vice had an opening and you submitted to Vice and they picked it up, but there's no expertise there. There's no bar, right? Like, I mean, it's so, and then from Vice, you can go to CNN. You can suddenly be speaking on CNN, but there's no pushback. There's no editor. there's no expertise hovering over that, saying like, well, that person may not exactly know what they're talking about, Yeah,
you're not really an expert, right? Yeah, I would hate to see some of these guys from UFO Twitter end up being on like CNN or whatever.
Well, then what's really sad too is this stuff gets rehashed then into like the little cottage industry podcast and UFO fandom world, like from that stuff from the top down. So they're just like completing the circle.
Yeah. It's and that's, I mean, the Twitter thing's great. Like, it's awesome that we can all talk and have these conversations. I think the illusion of expertise, though, is dangerous because, this isn't about just repeating talking points, or at least it shouldn't be. I mean, the UFO thing is so fascinating and it goes so deep. People who've had experiences have life-changing experiences. And if we're going to look at it, if suddenly the culture is opening up to that, to actually like taking a look at it, like, we should really look at it and not just be repeating, blindly, these kind of like bullet point statements that are handed out at the beginning of class. Like, okay, here's what we're going to repeat. Here's your test. Like, can you repeat everything that was said? Like, that's not how real research works. Yeah. And I think that it's, it does a disservice to the whole thing, I mean, because, okay, let's say they're pumping 10, and they are, it's the R&D push is in the billions of dollars, right? That's a significant amount of tax money that's being put into this research.
No doubt.
Which is an opportunity. Like, if you want to go from Twitter to making a difference, there's billions of dollars now floating out there if you honestly have the skills and the understanding and everything to work on that, but I don't think that is necessarily what we're seeing happen. I think that we're seeing this very shallow sort of artificial gloss over the whole thing.
Well, when you're talking about what this stuff really is, and you're talking about personal transformation, you're talking about maybe the transformation of humanity, it's hard not to get kind of like conspiratorial and think that maybe this is kind of a sinister attempt at controlling that unraveling that this phenomenon is actually producing.
Well, it's weird though, because I mean, again, without an organic wave, why now? Like, why are we controlling it now? Like, there hasn't been a wave, right? And everything that we're seeing is guided from people that were already writing about it.
Well, there's a lot of angles that it seems it could be anticipatory for, like maybe for technology or maybe for something else. That this is kind of like happening now because what's going to happen, or things people are going to be seeing more of because of maybe just certain technologies or other countries' technologies that are going to be that are brand new, and people are going to be seeing this stuff more. So it's kind of a way to prime people, and so they're not too shocked, maybe, or I don't know.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, it could be. Hopefully, it's for a giant invasion of UFOs.
Yeah, that would be preferable,
Yes.
of course, than just some Chinese drones.
Yeah, I'd much rather have the UFO apocalypse than
Come and dismantle the warheads and activate the starseeds.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting point that Whitley Strieber actually made in one of his kind of op-ed pieces he did for Unknown Country, which was that if you look at the UFO phenomena, and I know some people would argue with this, with the idea that, abductions are bad and that kind of thing, but it never really acts against people, right? Like, it always sort of helps people. I mean, you think of like Chris Bledsoe, right? Like, he was healed from Crohn's. Or, Whitley's gone through like a spiritual transformation through his interaction with the presence of the phenomena, so it doesn't act against anything. If it shuts down a nuke, like, that's not a bad thing.
Right.
Because it was doing it on all sides. It wasn't just, shutting down US nukes and then helping the Soviets or something. It was shutting down everybody's. And so is that bad? I mean, that it seems like, I don't know, there's a friendliness to it, or a spiritual growth quality to it that sort of gets lost when the only photos you have of what's allegedly the phenomena is gun sight footage,
Well,
Right.
and that the existing world power structure. I mean,
the revolutionary nature of the UFO, which is, it's a deep question.
so we're right back at, almost right back at theosophy. I mean, if there are these helpers, other beings from somewhere else who are the helpers, then there may be another side. It gets pretty speculative and weird.
Yeah, and that was something that was interesting looking at the origins of the starseed thing, was the depth of, everybody blames Scientology, but really there's so much theosophy in that stream, and that gets very complicated and strange in the history of it. But again, the complication of it, I think, is why it would be exciting to have a true multidisciplinary look at this stuff. But with a level of expertise, and not just, sort of common sense on the street, off the cuff exposition on it,
Well, I guess we'll see how that research, whatever it is going to be, goes.
Yeah, I'm really hoping for another year of the humanoid.
We gotta have some humanoids just walking all over the place.
Do you know any grant writers by chance?
Yeah, I don't know.
Now would be the time.
That's a good question. Is something like the year of the humanoid? I mean, like, are we gonna have something like that again, or have we just lost our imagination so much that like our brains aren't coming up with that anymore?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the question with all this stuff, though. Is like, what the hell happened in 1973 that you had Year of the Humanoid?
What's the mechanism? Right.
And it was interesting too, because there was a skeptical writer I don't know their name, but they had actually reposted in response to the UAP stuff. They had reposted a piece from a science magazine in 1971 that was saying, oh, well, people say that this UFO stuff happens on a 5-year pattern, but because of skepticism in that, we probably won't see it again. And so they were kind of proclaiming the death of the UFO in 1971. And then, 1973 hits and you have Year of the Humanoid and these massive UFO waves, so it's interesting. I haven't really looked into like what those 5-year patterns are, if we're set for another one, or if, and if you
sounds like solar cycles.
Yeah. I mean, and there's research into that too. Is it affected by the solar cycle? There's the Debrief recently did like a 3-part series on unidentified devices or something, I think it was called. I don't know what the title of the series was, but it was weird because they were including videos in it, and some of the videos were clearly the Earthlight phenomena, and so there's the complication of that too, where even in places that have these kind of like Earthlight phenomena, like Hazelden or Yakima Valley up in Washington, tied to that, there's often Bigfoot sightings or, actual UFO craft sightings and encounters that go beyond just sort of the Earthlight thing. So what exactly is happening? Or Skinwalker Ranch, I guess, would be another example of that kind of thing, where you have this like multi-layered accounts of experiences that go beyond just, lights moving in the sky that seem like some sort of natural plasma phenomena, But it was weird that the Debrief had the thing called, like unidentified devices or something, but then they were showing like plasma phenomena, and it was like that's not the same thing, Whatever they were describing with the Tic Tac was described as a solid object, and these plasma things that's not the same thing,
We've got the sounds of the Georgia forests in the background.
Yeah, those are we didn't have any brood 10 cicadas or anything. We just had our normal.
Yeah, us either, really.
Which is good. I guess the analogous or correlative to the brood 10 cicadas has been a massive bird die-off. So in the areas where the brood 10 came out, you have these birds just dropping dead in significant numbers.
Why is that? Just they eat all the food, or what?
No, they're wondering if the cicadas, since they've been in the ground for 17 years, have absorbed some sort of pesticide, or the brood 10 ones had a specific parasite that was killing them off, or not parasite, I'm sorry, fungus. And they're wondering if there's some fungal component or something, if they had some kind of fungus that was affecting the birds.
Well, everybody knows birds aren't real, so
that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, another layer of the thing. I was probably the UFOs killing off the surveillance drones so that they could fly more freely.
There you go.
Got to get rid of the birds, quote unquote birds.
Where do you think it's going?
Yeah,
David?
that's a good one.
The UFO stuff right now.
I think we're just going to see a continuous rollout now. I mean, we're in it, right? Like they've got the call out for the multi-platform analysis, research, development, the whole deal. So I think that we're just going to see a continuation of it. Nobody's pulled back. Everybody who was pushing for it, from a more of a UFO believer side are continuing, So I think that it will, I think we're just going to see a further development of it. What's interesting to me is what's going to, again, with this idea of the UFO waves, like what's going to happen in the current situation if we actually have a wave, right? Mm-hmm. Like what's going to happen now when people are so primed for it? That would be interesting to see.
Do you think that might be part of if there is some kind of master plan here, you think that might be part of the plan?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think you could fake the wave, because one of the things with there's the high weirdness aspect of it.
Yeah.
You know, so even if you had like really drones or holograms or whatever, Project Bluebeam-esque sort of concept of it, it doesn't have the same effect, you know. And I think that's one of the things that plays out with the Google Trends analysis, is that it just doesn't resonate, you know. I mean, so you're always going to have a certain segment that's sort of keyed into the mediation of it, but there's these underlying organic elements to a mass movement, or, you know, a mass awakening or something, that if they're not there, it's just not there, you know. It's sort of, you know, it's pop punk to what the punk movement was in like the 70s, right? Like, it just doesn't have the same feel.
I'm real surprised that with the pandemic that there was not, in such a time of tension. I'm real surprised that there wasn't more of a UFO flap.
Well, I mean, that's and that's one of the interesting things, again, that would be addressed with the multidisciplinary look, is what is the tension types that lead to, or that correlate with past flaps. Did the 1918 Spanish flu, did that have UFOs over it? You know, I mean, I know that it's a couple of years after the Fatima. But what, you know, it seems like most of the correlations in the past have been wars. You know,
Yeah.
like 1973 wave fits in with the Yom Kippur War,
Right.
you know, which I think,
And the oil crisis. Yeah.
the oil crisis.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, what are the actual traumatic triggers of a wave, or correlates to the wave, right?
Well,
People were also outside the least amount they'd probably have ever been. And we've also been glued to screens, so that might have something to do with it.
that's true too. But also, you know, I think that it may be, I've kind of played with the idea that these phenomenon have manifested themselves in different ways. So, you know, if you have the same mechanism behind UFOs that you have behind Bigfoot sightings, or you have behind ghost sightings, or what have you, then it may be that, like, you know, we just see it in different forms. So maybe the whole UFO thing just isn't as popular anymore, because the biggest popular thing right now is Bigfoot. That's the big popular thing. But 2016, you had all the weird clown sightings, and that's definitely a trickster kind of element.
Yeah, and a death element too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has, you know, it's tied to, the clown is tied to death and that kind of thing. Plague. That's kind of interesting. I wonder, has anybody done a study on that? Because the clown figure is a plague figure, you know.
Oh, wow.
Uh-oh.
Is that a precursor?
Right?
Well, I mean, we were going through a lot of tension in 2016. That was a hell of an election year.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you had the pandemic shortly after that, right? Mm-hmm. So because the clown figure is the rictus grin of a plague corpse. That's what the makeup is. Yeah,
that's true. That's a very good point.
I wonder if anybody's jumped on that.
It's up to you.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it always come up with these ideas like, man, I really wish somebody would write an awesome book on that. But
well, I've seen you've been getting really into the Bigfoot lately, and you said it was because you were kind of getting burned out on UFOs for a little bit, so you want to return to our furry friend for some
taking solace in Bigfoot's sweet, you know, pungent embrace. the skunk sweet sapience of the Sasquatch.
You've been listening to Bigfoot themed music?
Yeah, man, that like obsessively, like a freak. The Bigfoot ballads that Lenny Green wrote are just, they're majestic. It's amazing to me that it's really easy to make kind of parody songs with this stuff. But I try to hunt, and this was the same thing with the sort of Halloween bop and like ghoul rock and stuff. I really wanted stuff that was on some level legitimately good songcraft, on that theme. And what was amazing for me to discover recently was that Lenny Green and a couple other people had actually written straight Bigfoot ballads that if you took Bigfoot out of it, it was still a well-written kind of country ballad song, and they just happened to be about Bigfoot. And that was amazing. And it's just, it's incredible to hear, the history and mystery of Bigfoot expressed as a sort of pop country ballad,
That's amazing.
And I actually got into it when we were at Paramania, Adam. I was driving around with Greg Bishop, and he played me this Marlon Wallace song called Abominable Snow Creature. And it's just a really great indie country song from this outsider musician, Marlon Wallace. And it's like one chord, and it's just really intense and strange. And so I was trying to find other stuff like that. And the Lenny Green thing popped up. And Lenny Green is known as the Johnny Cash of Squatch ballads.
All right.
Yeah. He's and he has a delivery that is very Johnny Cash. If you're not.
Do you know where he's from?
He's from California.
Okay. Did he ever live in Nashville?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Is he alive?
I believe so.
Oh, okay. What are some notable hits for everybody so they can go check him out?
Did he stay at the Fiddler? Did he stay at the Fiddler's Inn when he was in Nashville?
Let me check here. I can get you some names of the Bigfoot ballads. He, Greg Bishop's WFMU show, Stop Hitting Yourself, has an entire Bigfoot playlist that he put up the other week that was pulled from some of the songs that I had selected, including a lot of Lenny Green stuff, because Lenny Green's kind of the guy when it comes to the Squatch ballads. Piney Woods Wild Man, fantastic song. Bigfoot, just Bigfoot.
I mean, of course, there's got to be a song just called Bigfoot.
Yeah. Well, and then there's also Bigfoot USA, which is
Nice.
incredible because at one point he starts just naming off the different names of Sasquatch and Bigfoot.
Is that sung to the tune of Surfing USA?
No, it's country. Yeah, it's all country. There's no real surfer kind of Bigfoot stuff. Buddy Knox was he had a song called Ragdoll, which was popular, I think, in the 50s or early 60s. And he has, at the time, had been unreleased until someone discovered the demo for it. But the Bigfoot song by Buddy Knox is fantastic. And that one's more of like a 50s country kind of thing. Don Jones' Bigfoot is one that people may know, because that's kind of the more well-known Bigfoot song. The Bigfoot Scenic Byway by Lenny Green, fantastic. That one's amazing. Valley of the Skookum is really good. Don't Pull That Trigger is awesome. It's a ballad all about, don't kill Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And it actually...
Don't pull that trigger.
Yeah. And I'm going to be playing that one on 4th of July, because that one talks about how Bigfoot was here at the founding of the nation.
That's right.
And so, like, Bigfoot is red, white, and blue,
Even before Morocco.
Yeah, Bigfoot was here, Bro Smith has a song called Bigfoot, which is awesome. It's kind of like a Dr. John sort of sounding ripoff. Like if you mix Dr. John with Wolfman Jack and maybe a little bit of Captain Beefheart, just like a taste, and then some Tom Waits, Bro Smith, Bigfoot. That's a good one. Where Bigfoot Walks is good. I mean, basically, if you look up Lenny Green and find his Bigfoot songs, like you won't go wrong.
He's hard to find with the Google search too, because I guess a popular host of a syndicated Quiet Storm radio show is named Lenny Green also. But I'm seeing that as recent as 2014, he is playing some Bigfoot conferences. So hopefully
he plays conferences. Where the Skunk Ape goes to, just one more just to throw out there. Where the Skunk Ape goes is incredible. So obviously, living in Georgia, in Skunk Ape territory, that one definitely is a great song to listen to for me. But yeah, I mean, anything Lenny Green, and he's got 3 albums, which I don't think are available anymore. And that was the other kind of cool thing, was that he doesn't seem to, I mean, he released some, like, you know, I'm a songwriter and I'm putting out CDs, but he didn't really run with it. You know, I mean, he didn't try to capitalize on it. So he's just an honest musician making beautiful Bigfoot music.
I wonder if he listens to Conspirinormal.
I hope so.
Strange Realities 2022, damn it.
Yeah.
That's some goals right there.
There you go.
I asked Adam about that, you know, if maybe next year fly Lenny in for a
for a ballad.
Yeah, ballad or two. You know.
We probably want to touch on some of the Christian fringe stuff that
okay.
Dave has been following and that we've been alerted to as well.
Yeah. Well, I used to be in it, so I can
been immersed in.
I could talk about it all day. Well, I think we were going to talk about a little bit more about the Skywatch TV a little bit.
Yeah. And kind of like post-Trump, where a lot of the stuff has been going.
Yeah, because it's getting weirder and weirder.
Yeah, because I mean they pivoted from, once Trump wasn't really the focal point, like it went straight to the UFO material. Mm-hmm. And presenting this sort of parallel and flipped worldview based on the UFO stuff, but through an end times focus. And what's been amazing with Skywatch is that within the last few months, at least within the last year, they've run articles on John Keel, Jacques Vallée, who have always sort of popped up in the literature as sources, because both Keel and Vallée have talked about the similarities between demonology and the contemporary UFO stuff. But Skywatch has really jumped on that and been actually, writing Jacques Vallée and John Keel into the sort of end times Christian narrative, which is it's surreal, you know.
Well, I mean, they are just able to comb and basically adopt anything into their worldview and present it in their own way. I mean, they're really good at doing that.
Well, and I think Adam may be able to speak to this, but I mean, I think they have like a legitimate interest in it, sure. that gives it a resonance, it's sort of,
I would say so. Yeah.
It's their cover art. I know we've talked about this before, but I mean, man, their graphic design is, what does Dr. Future call it?
It's the grindhouse
of Christploitation.
Yeah.
Christploitation.
Yeah.
It's like old No Limit Records, Master P Records.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I would love to take classes with their graphic designer, or have like one of those master classes.
Well, they look like heavy metal album covers.
Yeah,
they do. I mean, and they're what I think I mentioned to Seraphiel one day. Like, they're better at graphic design for these for this market than most of the people putting out UFO books.
Right.
And putting out paranormal books. Like, these guys have it down. Like, they're doing better artwork for this stuff, I mean, because Yeah, there's something to be said for the serious, scientific and mature element of it, but there's also like the only person that probably could beat them on cover design is Tim Beckley. I mean, like they're right along the same kind of like vibe, and that's what people want. I mean, that's
Right.
Right now, like with the UFO thing, what's been awesome to see is TMZ pick up as like the source for your UFO news, because and you see people like Jason Colavito kind of mocking that, but the UFO has always been a tabloid subject, and the National Enquirer had Hynek on their blue ribbon panel and had serious scientists on their blue ribbon panel, and it was the National Enquirer. So to see TMZ come into that space and to start presenting the UFO, I mean, that for me is really interesting and kind of exciting. But Skywatch, their graphic design, like, is that tabloid intense, I'm looking at their website right now and just in awe. They have one of their series, their series that they've been running for a while now is The Great Deception is Coming. And this is the idea that the UFO represents the vehicle for Satan to come in with the Nephilim, to bring back the days of Noah, when the fallen angels mate with humanity and create these abominations on the earth.
So I'll say this, like, this for me was the entry point for me into all this kind of weird stuff, because this is kind of how, because when I was in college, high school, college, I was very much the nuts and bolts guy. I believed that aliens were real. And then I got saved and became a Christian. And then I kind of left that behind me. And then one night I heard Tom Horn on Coast to Coast.
Yeah.
And this was about, like, I don't know, man, 2004, 2005. And I was just like, wow, this guy really makes sense, And then that kind of shifted over into guys like L.A. Marzulli, which I followed him for a good long time. And that's actually how I met Dr. Future, was because I went to a conference here in Nashville that L.A. Marzulli was speaking at. And that's how I met Mike and how I met Guy Malone and got into it with them. And so I was very much like, and I went to the Future Congress that Tom Horn put on. I got to meet Tom Horn, because Mike was very much in with that crowd too back in the day. And this was about like 2010, 2011, I think is when I did that. I got to meet Tom Horn in a room with gas masks in it in Branson, Missouri. Shit. I'll tell you a funny story. When I went to the first Future Congress, Tom Horn's wife was actually like taking, like, because you sign up for it, you check in, whatever. And like it randomly generated a number for me, which was like 666. And I was like, whoa. And I thought about it for a second. I thought, man, this would be pretty funny for me to walk around with this. But I was like, I don't know. I might get some weird looks. And so I was like, hey, could you change this? And man, that was like crazy, because I got to meet, that's where I met Doc Marquis and saw G. Edward Griffin speak. And like, that was, I mean, you talking,
Fringe.
This was a different Adam, okay, back then. But I will tell you, I mean, like, to your point about Derek Gilbert, and I had Derek Gilbert and Josh Peck on the show. In fact, it was one of the first shows, I think. Maybe it was right before Sir Fiel joined us. But they are into the UFO mythology. I mean, they're very much into it, and they were very much into talking to they tried to talk to who was the astronaut that was all the ions guy? Edgar Mitchell. Yeah, they tried to talk to him and couldn't email him back and forth. And of course, to them, it seemed like it was all this big conspiracy, But I mean, and of course, I was Guy Malone. I still consider a pretty good friend of mine, But he's not in with that crowd. But they've kind of, in a way, taken all that narrative and they have rolled with it.
Yeah, and and it's interesting too because they have. I mean, it's an entire sort of. I mean, it's beyond a worldview. Like it's a world that they live in, Mm-hmm. And they have one of the things that I've always really been fascinated by is they often find things that other people don't write about, and the conclusions may not be accurate, but if you look at their sort of source material and follow the trails that they follow, a lot of times they find really interesting stuff because they're looking at it from this, different way, and they're trying to find the Antichrist and everything.
Right.
But they oftentimes have really interesting sourcing, and it's like a whole world, but where do you psychotronic weapon tech, genetically engineered magneto protein remotely controls brain and behavior, right? I mean, that's amazing. They're, they're writing about psychotronic weapons, and,
right.
And
that is grindhouse stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's, and I guess within sort of the targeted individual milieu, you have that kind of thing. But this is amazing to see this. I mean, I can find books published by Defender, which is Skywatch's thing, their publishing arm. I can find those at the thrift store. I mean, they're selling enough that they're popping up in Goodwill.
Yeah, you had actually freaked out because you found out that Dr. Future wrote. He actually wrote articles for a couple of books for Defender.
Yeah, Pandemonium's Engine. Yep. I think he has one on the Nimrod as a super soldier. Incredible, an incredible piece. Yeah, I mean that's just it's amazing. I've exchanged emails with Tom Horn because I actually discovered them through George Hansen. Because he told me that he had talked to Chris Putnam for Chris Putnam's Supernatural Worldview book.
That's a great book, by the way.
Yeah, and I was like, you did what? George, what are you doing? And he explained, that they had contacted him because they were interested in the trickster theory and that. And so I started looking at the books, and I had sent an email to Tom Horn, to see if I could get a review copy of it, because I think George told me before it was published. And so Tom was super nice and sent me a whole bunch of books, which was awesome. I now have a small collection of Defender Publishing books, which I'm very excited to have, And one of we were kind of talking about it before the show, but one of the things that they do really well. I mean, every aspect of their media, to me, just I'm obsessed with communications and marketing theory and that, and they run such a great multi-level marketing scheme. And one of the things they do really good are the kind of repurposing news stories and other people's blog posts and framing it within their worldview for just a short link sub, and then linking to, the article. And I had written an article prior to the Project Blue Book show coming out. And talking about paranormal belief in media and how it affects how media shapes belief and that kind of thing. And I was looking at the stats on the blog, and I saw that I had a link back that was getting a ton of hits from Skywatch TV. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And I went over there, and sure enough, they had taken that Project Blue Book piece and reframed it, within their thing, and then linked back to my blog. And I was so excited. I was horrified and excited at the same time, because it was just, I'd seen them do it to others, and now there I was. Contribute.
Well, you are noted occult expert, David Metcalfe.
That's right. Yeah.
Hey, you could get right on in there, David. I mean, you could start writing for them, and then
all you gotta do is get saved.
You'll get you'll get on. You can get on the Skywatch TV with Derek and Sharon, and
I don't have that level of energy though.
And eventually, I mean, you could be on Jim Baker.
Would I get to hang out with the dachshund though? That's the question.
You might. You never know. You might get to hang out with the dachshund.
That really is one of the most. So
make that your only stipulation is like, if I'm going to do this, I get to hang out with the wiener dog.
Yeah, I need to hang out with the dachshund. That's got to be. I mean, and the fact that they do their end times kind of like video cast from a room that has a massive painting of their dachshund on an easel behind them while they're talking about, Nephilim.
Is his name Sirius?
I'm not sure what somewhere they have to post what the name is. I don't know what his name is. It's wow. Yeah. I know there's Sam Kestenbaum is a New York Times freelance writer that had posted on his Twitter feed some pictures of the Jim Baker studios. And I really excitedly sent him a note. I was like, oh man, are you getting to see the show live? But he was there. They'd already, the season was over, so they weren't filming. But he's written some pieces on, I forget the guy's name, who did the Harbinger book, Adam?
Jonathan Cahn?
Yeah, he did a New York Times profile of Jonathan Cahn and the prophetic movement. And so he was at the Jim Baker thing doing some research for another piece, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird to me now, looking back on it, of just how, like, I mean, Dr. Future, he had a lot of these people on his show. Like Tom Horn, I mean, Derek Gilbert, of course. I mean, and Mike's been on Derek's show many, many times. And even recently, in fact, to talk about the new book. But it's just weird to me now just how, like, I tease Mike sometimes. I'm just like, man, this could have been you. You could have been on Jim Baker. hanging out the Jim Baker show.
Yeah, it's a wild. And the thing, I mean, the Christian market is, it's a sizable market. So, they talk about how they're kind of on the sidelines of that, but I don't think that any of them are suffering for selling their material.
Yeah, they're still selling DVDs too. Who still does that?
Yeah, well, it's like a tape. I mean, it's like the tape ministries.
Yeah.
Only recently, like there's the Lake Hamilton Bible Camp, which was a big hub of exorcism culture in the 70s. They were still selling tapes, like cassette tapes, up until recently. They may still sell cassette tapes. They started out as a tape ministry, like back in the 60s. And they were still, up into like 2000 something, like selling cassette tapes. It was amazing. And it's kind of, it's like a parallel world, it's like a different, you enter a different world with these folks have generated their own porthole,
Yeah, that's something me and Adam were kind of talking about, because they also just got deplatformed from YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So the thing is, like, they've created this, they have this like media echo chamber where you can just get the app on your Roku or whatever, Apple TV or whatever.
Yeah, I downloaded it to your Roku when I was out there during the conference. I made sure to leave that for you.
So like you're you're in their little ecosystem. And that was making it, we were kind of talking about this stuff, of course it's kind of cliche to talk about deplatforming and internet censorship, and there's a million arguments about it. But if people leave and they go from their echo chamber on Facebook or YouTube or whatever into like an even tighter echo chamber of something like what Skywatch has,
right?
Or I was trolling Parler when it started, and Parler took all these people who were already in this like right-wing echo chamber and then put them in one with like straight up Nazi shit, so like, yeah, they were, around some pretty extreme shit on Facebook, but then it turned into like straight up neo-Nazis that were their friends. So it's like, who knows what that kind of thing does. But yes, Skywatch, they're not that negative, of course, but they definitely have this whole like ecosystem of media.
And they have enough personalities too, to be able to have their own ecosystem.
Yeah.
That's one of the interesting things about their, sort of, they have a network of personalities that they can draw on. And because they're an ostensibly Christian group, they can pull in people from, who may not be aligned with the sort of main core of their messaging, but who fit within the wider sort of like parachurch, milieu, that they can like draw these people in as speakers for their stuff, so they never run out of content, and they have the format of the news show allows them to, they don't even necessarily have to have a guest. They can still produce content where they just have a talking head, reading the news. Like Derek Gilbert does like a daily news roundup where he frames the news for people, And so it's this amazing, just as a media organization, it's a masterpiece, and with the look too, with the graphic design and stuff, like they have a specific look, they have like a specific feel to their stuff. And what's amazing is you have these like really lurid covers, but then their set design is it's like the plastic flowers and like going to church on Sunday kind of set design. It's an amazing juxtaposition.
Right, and they've always got these like bundle deals on their site.
Yeah.
So like right now they've got some book called Dark Covenant.
Right.
And then
a DVD with it.
Oh, Occultianity.
Yeah.
Is the DVD that's with it. Well, that's a $75 value. However,
but only a $35 donation.
Right.
Right, because they're a church organization, so they're a 501c3.
Yes. Oh God. Do they have a distribution program?
Got a warehouse.
Well, I'm wondering if you can be like a licensed Skywatch distributor and then like set up people underneath you, like make a pyramid scheme out of it.
An affiliate kind of. I would think so.
I'm going to pull up in the church parking lot, open up the trunk. Hey guys, got that Skywatch. Got that new Skywatch. Got the Dark Covenant right here, hot off the press. $75 value.
It's awesome because they've got the Children of the Damned, like
yeah,
right.
The screenshot from the Children of the Damned with the kids with the glowing eyes. That's amazing. Right. Well, and it's interesting too because again, it's this they are what they preach against kind of thing, because like occultianity, like, well, what on earth is like what are they? This. If you look at the website, like what? Yeah. Like this is occultianity.
You are participating in this stuff, even if it's vicariously, you are still engaging.
Well, that was the thing of just like how I used to listen to PID radio a lot. That was their Peering into Darkness, and that was Derek and Sharon's radio.
Peering into Darkness. That's an apt title, right?
And it was all that kind of stuff. It was all just like looking at some of it. It was like Russ Dizdar, and then they talk a lot about Jack Parsons and all this kind of
sexual
all that
rituals.
Yeah, it was all that kind of stuff that for me was like, oh, I got to listen to this.
Titillating.
Yeah, right. Uh-oh. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, and they're master performers too, because they've got that. I think Tom Horn comes out of. He was Assemblies of God, wasn't he? He was an Assemblies of God preacher.
I believe so. He was actually, I think he was a producer or something on 700 Club, or he helped Pat Robertson somehow.
Yeah.
And something like that.
They've got that, like, they've been trained in performance, so they have this. It's such a fascinating, and it's so parallel to everything. What's really interesting to me is, like, if you follow Grant Cameron, like, Grant Cameron will talk about portals, and then wait a day or two and Skywatch will have something on demonic portals. They're so parallel to the sort of paracultural narrative, and they run right with it. And Skinwalker Ranch has its own TV show. Like, boom, they're doing stuff on portals and Skinwalker Ranch. They're right on top of it, and it's this parallel stream, but presenting everything through a dark, like, heavily anti-Catholic,
right.
According to their current narrative, like, the Pope is ready for the alien Antichrist, and
Of course.
Putnam was big on that stuff. I mean, I had Putnam on several times, actually, in the early days of Conspirinormal. And, like, he was big on all that kind of, I guess, anti-modern Catholicism, because there was a lot of talk about Desjardins.
Right.
And what a negative influence he had and all this kind of stuff. And especially when Benedict retired and Francis took over, that was the whole, like, was it the Saint Malachi prophecy and all that kind of stuff,
Right. Yeah.
Which is all stuff that's also in Malachi Martin's work and all that.
Which is all stuff we're going to touch on the Patreon segment of this show, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did want to switch it to a more little local flavor real quick here on the same topic.
Local flavor.
You all might have heard of this local preacher who's gained some national notoriety lately, named Pastor Greg Locke. What is the name of his church, Adam?
Global Vision.
Okay, yeah, so I think
I've passed by it many, many times.
I think I have a friend who has
exactly
a rap record label named the same thing. That's pretty funny. But so let's see here. I want to play a little clip because he was kind of going off the deep end already. Big, Trump supporter, and he is got a lot of national attention for having a well-known political operative featured at his church, and but now he is just, and I think he was there, wasn't he, on January 6th at the Capitol?
That's what said that he was around in the area. Yeah. And the person he had speaking in late December was Roger Stone. He had Roger Stone speaking in his church.
And so he has fully gone off the deep end now, though, to like full on Q, underground military bases, child trafficking, craziness. Yeah. So I was going to play a little clip from this. Let me wind it up here, because we can talk about it all day long, but I don't think anyone's really going to get the effect unless they hear this nutcase.
God's about to bring the whole house down, ladies and gentlemen. These bunch of sex trafficking mongrels are about to be exposed. These bunch of pedophiles in Hollywood are going to be exposed for who they are. I don't care what you think about fraudulent Sleepy Joe. He's a sex trafficking, demon-possessed mongrel. He's of the left. He ain't no better than the Pope and Oprah Winfrey and Tom Hanks and the rest of that wicked crowd. God is going to bring the whole house down. I said he's going to bring the whole house down. He's going to burn the whole thing to the ground. He's going to expose all these bunch of pedophiles. I'm telling you, he's going to expose Kamala Harris for the Jezebel demon that she is. I don't know why pastors don't talk about this stuff. Well, I do. They don't want to seem crazy. I'm already crazy. People like, do you really think it's that much of an epidemic? Do you honestly believe, we're going to get some more crazy. Do you honestly believe, Pastor Locke, that the military uncovered tunnels beneath the Capitol building and beneath the White House and in the Five-Fingered Lakes? Do you really believe that they found kids? Yeah, both live ones and dead ones. And if you disagree with that, and if you try to discount that, and if you try to cover that, and if you try to keep that on the DL, you're just as complicit as Hunter Biden and the rest of them bunch of crack-smoking perverts.
Okay.
Yeah. And since we played that and we're going to talk about it, well, Conspirinormal will probably end up in the next sermon. At least that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, there it is.
So, I mean, we're dealing with now full-on mainstreaming of all the weird-ass conspiracy culture from the 80s and 90s. Like, and now this is going to be a path for preachers and different congregations to try to become relevant.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's in a church. He was in a tent in one of those, but
yeah, it's the tent that's on the property that they use. I think they started doing that so he was when COVID hit and they wanted to restrict the church attendance and everything, he refused to. So he actually was one of the first to do like that kind of like drive-in churches around here. He was kind of forced to do that. And he is just he's kind of all over the place. Very much has been in the last few years kind of a local phenomenon. But then in the last few months, especially in the last 6 months, he has just blown up all across the country. CNN has probably given him like really undue attention. I mean, I thought it was funny whenever he got in. He was in. He's one of those guys that likes to sit in the back of his car in his car and yell into his phone and put it on the YouTube.
Isn't that what they call a podcast?
This is what they call a podcast. And he was talking about how he walked into Dunkin' Donuts and they wanted him to wear a mask, and he was talking about how he wanted to like punch the guy in the face and all this kind of stuff.
Real Jesus stuff,
Yeah, right. Yeah, real. What would Jesus do, right? So, but he has just become more and more on the fringe lately, and we can't help but think that there's that. Surfiel you had a good point about the Roger Stone stuff, that he's possibly getting advice from him to be as outrageous as you possibly can be.
Yeah, he's taking a cue from the Trump book.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that that's where we are now in some of the fringe areas of religion, it's really sad. But that's, talk about irresponsible. He is like promoting some really dangerous ideas, because if you believe that, then what are you supposed to do? It's gonna cause people, beliefs like that cause people to act.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially when they're presented with that amount of fervor, and his framing of it too, and people will think I'm crazy. I am crazy. And here's some more crazy ideas that are all true, and that's that was one of the things, when I was years ago looking into Billy Graham, he's very explicit in some of his writing, not necessarily like the books published under his name, but in kind of his correspondence and stuff. There's points where he talks about being very aware of crowd control techniques and rhetoric and the proper way to deliver something and what to watch for in the crowd to see if they're affected by it. And that, amped up like this. It's, they're using I don't want to use the term mind control, but it kind of is. I mean, they're using techniques that they know very well what the effects are going to be.
Yeah.
Right.
And you get somebody unstable in that, and they're, I mean, that's where you get people shooting people.
Yeah. Well, this stuff is, I mean, it's well, first of all, it's worrisome. But, to Serfiel's point, that this is the kind of stuff that we were hearing. Well, it's coming directly from QAnon, but QAnon is just this mishmash of conspiracy theory and conspiracy culture that goes back a long way away. And so it's stuff that, you might hear on some fringe website, or you might have heard in some fringe book or somewhere, but now, grandma is listening to this stuff and well, did you hear what Pastor Greg said? I mean, it's
and grandma wouldn't even believe that George W. Bush was a bad man,
right
when you try to tell her about 9/11
right
back then. But
right.
but now grandma's telling you about dumbs and satanic ritual abuse and
he knows that he's going to get all kinds of attention for it, because CNN has been really covering this guy lately.
And that comes again from the media cycle that we were talking about earlier, because of Right Wing Watch. Mm-hmm. So Right Wing Watch publishes these excerpts. I mean, that you played that off Right Wing Watch, I think.
Yep.
Which, by the way, Right Wing Watch got their YouTube channel taken down. YouTube is just baby Ewing everything. It's just stomping on whatever it can stomp on right now.
The algorithm, is a blind sword that just cuts,
Right.
But I mean, since they focus on that stuff, that's where CNN then picks it up. So it's this cycle of from blog to mainstream media,
The same thing, same thing going on.
Which, I mean, it's good that people know that this exists, but then it gets complicated because once it hits CNN, then he gets the focus, and then people, it's that nasty cycle of weaponized information.
Mm-hmm. Well, David, I'm curious. I mean, I'm curious where you think that all this is going, and how these fringe ideas are going to just keep becoming more and more mainstream, and especially the influence that it's having on evangelical Christianity right now. I mean, Global Visions Church, from what I understand, I would drive past it a lot because it was on my delivery route. And, it just seemed like it was just a simple little church. It didn't seem like it was anything that was a big deal. It just seemed like any other kind of church plant that you see anywhere. And now all of a sudden here it is, and it's just and it's like, with COVID especially, I mean, the pastor has been radicalized and the church has been radicalized. So how much more of this kind of stuff do you think we're going to see?
I mean, it's been around for a long time, and unfortunately, the things that make stuff like Skywatch such an incredible example of a media organization, it's because they're using media techniques that are very effective. So, I mean, it's only going to get worse. And, unfortunately, the thing about apocalyptic narratives is that in some ways they're self-fulfilling. And, I mean, these, in the same way that folks like Skywatch can grab things that are appearing in the sort of paranormal popular culture and then reformat them to fit their worldview, I mean, as the wealth gap increases, as, environmental issues increase and as social stability decreases, you know, this stuff becomes more prevalent. And in becoming more prevalent, continues to push the very things that it's saying are signs of the end of the world, you know? So it's incredibly dangerous, you know, and the anti-communist propaganda that was tied to Billy Graham and that anything that happens in the world that is, you know, in some ways can be reframed to prove their point. That's kind of the mechanism that they use. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's a lot of projects to kind of try to stop the spread of disinformation and misinformation, and you may be able to mitigate some of the, you know, sort of like street level spread of it. But it's gone so far, and with the way that the internet is, and, you know, Serafia, like you were talking about with echo chambers and that, I mean, unfortunately, this stuff looks like it just is going to keep spreading until, you know, violence occurs, possibly over multiple events, you know. I mean, it just doesn't end. And the other thing with these, like this just really hyper rhetoric, I mean, you have people like, what's her name? I mean, there's QAnon Congress people now.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene and that, you know, so you have this in Congress. And before it was like fully in Congress, because there obviously were fellow travelers in Congress. Before it was fully in Congress, it was steeped throughout the military culture. Mm-hmm. You know, Skywatch is really popular and has, you know, people who write for them and talk that are at the like Pentagon advisory level, you know. I always find it.
I think Colonel McGinnis, I think, is one of them.
Yeah. And I forget the other guy's name. There's another guy who's written about like warrior Christianity and stuff like that. He's more tied to Boykin, General Boykin. Yeah. Who was the leader of the Delta Force.
Right.
You know, I mean, so, you know, this stuff is deeply steeped in American culture, and, you know, they have ties, you kind of touched on it earlier, with traditionalist Catholic movements. You know, I mean, the parachurch organizations have influence in, you know, around the world, wherever missionaries are sent. So it's, you know, it's deeply embedded, and now we're just sort of seeing it bubble up more, but it, you know, I don't know. I don't see it going anywhere good, and I don't see any way for it to stop.
Yeah. It's a process of radicalization that is very similar to what they say the Islamic terrorists, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, that they went through.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's, you know, the idea of these groups being the American Taliban, mm-hmm. right? You know, and the other thing too is that a lot of them either parallel or are actively involved in the Dominionist movement, which is actively seeking to subvert democracy and implant their worldview and people, you know, influencers with their worldview within the political, social fabric, you know, and media fabric and the rest of it. So, you know, I mean, you have this guy ranting like this. Well, you know, people who watch Tucker Carlson are getting a similar message, just not quite as radical, but they can easily, you know, Tucker's just, you know, undergirding this stuff, which is for like the more like radical people. And it all has to do with people's pain, you know, and their inability to kind of feel like they have a place in culture. And one of the, you know, unfortunately, with as much connectivity as digital communications offer us, it also has created this sort of isolation and shallowing of everything. And there's not the community anymore. So people don't really feel like they have a place. And I mean, you think about every major city, you know, if you listen to the news, it's always, you know, the homeless problem and stuff like that. And it's like, well, this isn't the homeless problem. Like, these are people that are completely dispossessed, you know, and the numbers are significant. It's, you know, I mean, Austin has tent cities. If you go to LA, like, there's streets, there's blocks that are taken up with like tent cities of people who have no place to go and no place in culture, you know. And then it's only a little step up for people who maybe have a house or something, but their jobs are meaningless, you know, and they're just stuck in a cycle of like eat, sleep, you know, and watch media that seems to give them some sort of like feeling of meaning. And, you know, the culture's just been stripped. And it, you know, that media cycle, again, from like tweet to blog post to major media, you know, only deepens that, because that's not how culture is generated. You know, I mean, that's how information is spread, but that's not, information isn't culture. So there's no depth there. There's no, you know, nothing for people to grasp meaning on. And when you've got this guy, you know, up there giving these people a mission, right? Like a mission to save the world, they go from being, you know, people who have no place in the future to suddenly they're, you know, they're part of God's army that's fighting the darkness, right? So that, you know, and that's and I mean, meaning. Yeah, and it's, you know, that idea of being part of God's army is part of the rhetoric. I mean, there's the warrior bride of Christ was a huge sort of framework for this stuff. That was really popular in the early 2000s, where, you know, images of a bride, you know, a woman in a bridal gown with combat boots on and a sword. And that was the, you know, the church triumphant, like coming at the end of days, you know. So this idea of being a warrior for Christ is part of the memetics of the whole movement, you know. And that's, you know, QAnon, right? Like, it ran on this idea that like Trump was the savior figure that was going to come in and he was like the true king kind of thing, you know? Yeah. And that paralleled stuff in the parachurch organizations, talking about Trump as the new Cyrus and the new king, and the, you know, prophesied as being, you know, sort of the savior of the church and stuff. I mean, this rhetoric it's intense. It's medieval, you know. I mean, and in a time period where our culture is just collapsing, you know, where there is no solid identity for anybody to stand behind, you know. And then that's one of the things that's interesting too about the UFO stuff coming out, is because we've got no culture to really reflect on the UFO. You know, there's no solid point where anyone can stand and look at the UFO. It just sort of comes in this decentralized, weird narrative, you know, in all these different ways. And there's nothing to compare it to, really. There's nothing to say that it's different than or weirder than, because you've got people thinking that all sorts of things, you know. I mean, the reptilian thing, right? Like, if your politicians are reptilians, the idea of UFOs being around isn't really a big stretch.
Yeah. That was very well put, David. That was, yeah. I like what you said. Fascinating stuff. David, I think we could talk to you for a long, long time, but you, I guess that you're planning on coming to Nashville
hopefully. Yeah, I'm trying to work my way out there, so I'm planning on it.
Excellent.
We'll do everything we can to facilitate that.
Yeah, we definitely gonna make that happen for you to get up here. Tell people where they can find you and your blog and all that good stuff before we end the show.
Yeah, davidmetcalfe.wordpress.com has a ton of writings and pontification on these topics. I've also started to design t-shirts, which there's a link at the right-hand side top there that you will see. So go get yourself a t-shirt. with weird.
Highly recommended.
Yeah, highly recommended. It started. I did a design for The Saucers Will Keep Their Secrets as sort of my take on the UFO stuff, which is a pro saucer take, pro UFO. But yeah, there's that, and then on Twitter, David B. Metcalfe. And those would probably be the best places to find me.
Okay, excellent. And you got, like you guys heard, David will be with us at Strange Realities 2021, and we are gearing up for that at this moment. You guys, if you are coming to Nashville, it is $70 to attend all 3 days. We will probably have some announcements about the day rates if you just want to come for one day. But if you're already flying to Nashville and coming out here, you want to come for the whole thing. And it is $30 to watch it online, of which you will have access to that as well if you are coming to Nashville, so that if you want to go back and watch something later, you can.
And we have some hotel rates on the website to help you out when you stay here. If you are interested in networking with your fellow conspiranormalists and getting Airbnbs together and things like that, contact us and we can try to put you guys together.
Yeah. And if you guys go to the website, there is a lodging section where we have the hotel that you will need to call to get the special rate, and you just tell them that you're with Strange Realities Conference. So that is all on there. And Patreon, we also have
at patreon.com. You can learn how to become a conspiranormalist yourself. For only $5, you get a secret transmission every week from me and Adam. And at the $10 level, you get to join our Mystic crew and every month have a hangout where you get access to people like David and get to see presentations that are exclusive, get to see cool ideas being developed, and just get to hang out with everybody, have a good time as well. And at the $20 level, you get admitted to the Ancient Circle of Strange Realities, and you get a exclusive Patreon-only t-shirt and a very special experience at the Strange Realities Conference that you will be finding out about soon. So, guys, check us out at patreon.com/conspiranormal.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and we will be back next time with some couple of interesting guests. We'll talk to you later on Conspirinormal.
If you would like to help the show, please consider becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/conspiranormal or leave a one-time donation at conspiranormal.com. And please check out our YouTube channel, Conspiranormal Podcast.